Yesterday, administration officials were expressing concern that about a Russian request to China for military assistance in their Ukraine invasion. I know that Jake Sullivan met with Yang Jiechi earlier in Rome, and the White House will have to say more. Will have more to say about this later. But I'm wondering if, in the meantime, you have gotten any indication that that this request that you say has been made has been met with any kind of a response, either positive or negative, by the Chinese.
Well, Matt, to your question, we haven't spoken to this and not going to comment specifically on these reports. What I can say broadly, however, and you alluded to this, is the fact that our National Security Advisor, who's accompanied by our Assistant Secretary for the region, Dan Crittenbrink, is in Rome today, where they met with Yang Jiechi and his delegation from the PRC. The National Security Advisor and our delegation raised directly and very clearly our concerns about the PRC's support to Russia in the wake of the invasion and the implications that any such support would have for the PRC's relationship not only with us, but for its relationships around the world. That includes our allies and partners in Europe and in the Indo-Pacific. Beyond that, I'm just not in a position to get into the details, but the purpose of this meeting, and you will hear more from the White House later today, I expect, was to convey very clearly our concerns and to discuss the implications.
Okay, but you said that you raised, I'll go back and look here, but you said that you raised your concerns about Chinese support for. So does that mean that you think that they already are supporting?
I am not confirming anything from here. What I will say is that we are watching very closely the extent to which the PRC, or any other country for that matter, provides any form of support, whether that's material support, whether that's economic support, whether that's financial support, to Russia. Any such support from anywhere in the world would be of great concern to us. It would be of course, the greatest concern if a country like the PRC were to be doing that. A country that, by the way, has tremendous leverage with Russia, has a relationship with Russia that is distinct from the relationship that we or just about any other country on the planet has with Russia. And with that in mind, could do more than probably many other countries to bring an end to this senseless violence, to this brutality, to Putin's premeditated war of choice. We have communicated very clearly to Beijing that we won't stand by if we will not allow any country to compensate Russia for its losses.
Let me put it a different way. Are you disappointed in how the Chinese have responded to your outreach?
I think, Matt, it is fair to say that it is incumbent upon every country around the world to speak out clearly, to allow there to be no ambiguity in terms of where they stand. You know, we've heard statements from the PRC that have somewhat of an ambivalent message, calling for a diplomatic solution. I read a statement the other day from a PRC official calling the situation complicated. There's nothing complicated about this. This is naked aggression. This is a war of choice. This is a country, one individual at the top of that country, violating in a brazen manner what have been the cardinal rules of the international order for the past 70 years. The basic tenet that big countries cannot bully small countries, that might no longer makes right, concepts that should have been banished to the last century, should not be around today. So we would like to see every country make very clear where it stands and to stand on the side of the rules-based order. The very rules-based order, Matt, that has benefited, of course, not only the United States and our allies and partners, but also countries like Russia and China. One final point on this, and we've made this point before. Countries like the PRC have, over the years, touted and brandished the concept of sovereignty, often pointing to sovereignty in any manner and any matter of foreign policy and diplomacy. If the concept of sovereignty means anything in practice to a country like the PRC, we would expect countries like that to stand up, to speak out, to make clear that a blatant violation of state sovereignty, the likes of which we have not heretofore seen in this century, is unacceptable. Tamara.
So just to follow up on that, Ned, we have reporting showing that U.S. sent diplomatic cable to allies in NATO and in Asia saying China had shown willingness to supply Russia with military and economic assistance. Can you say anything about the scope of this economic and military assistance?
I can't, and I would point you to that somewhat extended answer I just gave to Matt. The point is, it is true. We have coordinated very closely with our allies and partners. We have shared concerns not only about, of course, Russia's egregious behavior, but concerns beyond that. I'm just not in a position to speak to it in detail.
So what's next then? Because Jake Sullivan over the weekend said there would be consequences. Will you guys now convene and start working on a sanctions package for China as well?
Well, again, we're not going to preview where this might go. Obviously, don't want to entertain a hypothetical like that at this point, but I can point to what has happened today. And the National Security Advisor, our Assistant Secretary, our delegation met with Yang Jiechi and his delegation to precisely make clear our concerns and to be very candid in terms of the implications. Again, we are watching very closely to the extent to which the PRC or any country in the world provides support, material, economic, financial, rhetorical, otherwise, to this war of choice that President Putin is waging against the government of Ukraine, against the state of Ukraine, against the people of Ukraine. And we have been very clear, both privately with Beijing, publicly with Beijing, that there would be consequences for any such support.
Just one more thing. Just at the beginning of this, the Chinese were walking a more ambiguous line, perhaps. What is your assessment that why they changed their mind and are now partnering up with Russia?
I am not going to speak for the PRC. I will let them explain their actions. I will let them.
U.S. assessment of why Beijing has changed their mind. Surely you have an assessment.
I will let them explain their actions. I will let them explain their words. I think there is a lot for them to explain. Look, I think the broader point is that we have seen the relationship between the PRC and Russia grow closer. This is not a phenomenon that has taken place over recent days or even recent weeks. This is a relationship that has grown closer over the course of many years now. And I think we saw an encapsulation of that with the 5,000-word communique that the two countries put out now a number of weeks ago. Without going too deep into the analysis of the relationship of that two sovereign countries share, what I will say is that what does seem to unite them is a vision of the world that is in stark contrast to the vision that the United States and our allies and partners have not only built and promoted and defended, but the system that itself has advantaged countries like the PRC and Russia. This is a free and open rules-based order that has governed affairs between states for more than 70 years now. This is very clearly a case of two autocracies with the desire to see a world that is more closed, that is less open, that is less free, come together, in some ways joining forces. And we're watching very closely to determine the form that any such cooperation may take. Andrea.
Ned, it seems hardly a coincidence that this is a pivotal moment in terms of Russia and Russia's finances. There is a lot of reporting that they could default by Wednesday if someone doesn't bail them out. And now you have the National Security Advisor on a quick trip to Rome to talk to the Chinese in a matter of some urgency. So would it be fair to conclude that it is vitally important to the sanctions that were imposed on the central bank and on Russia in general by the U.S., that you get an answer in the next, within 24 hours, within 48 hours from China, that this is a key moment in terms of potential financial support?
Andrea, I think
Russia?
it is fair to conclude that the Russian economy is in dire straits. That has been the case ever since these series of sanctions and other economic measures were instituted at the very outset of the invasion of Ukraine. We can point to any number of metrics. I did see an independent analysis that Russia is on the brink of default. We know that its credit rating is now at junk status. We know that the Russian stock market will be closed at least through this week, now going on several weeks of closure, in an apparent effort to forestall capital flight that is bound to happen as soon as the Russian stock market reopens, whenever that is. The ruble is almost literally worthless. It is worth less than a penny at this point. You could go on and on and on. Here's the point. We've made very clear that any country that would seek to attempt to bail Russia out of this economic, financial morass will be met with consequences. We will ensure that no country is able to get away with such a thing. But here's the other point. No form of economic or financial support will be able to extricate Russia from the strategic morass that it has created for itself. Russia today, Russia going forward, is a much weaker country. It is a country that is in a strategically unenviable position because of the diplomatic isolation, the diplomatic rebuke, but also the economic costs and the export controls. The measures that we have put in place to see to it that Russia cannot import the inputs, key components it needs for its strategic ambitions in the world. That is not going to change. That will not change until and unless President Putin changes course.
The export controls are a long-term issue for Russia. The collapse of its currency and lack of reserves to bail it out is precipitous.
You have a series of short-term and long-term measures.
In the short term, what do you understand the financial relationship between Russia and China to be as of today?
Look, I will let these two countries speak to their relationship. It's not for me to characterize the economic relationship or the potential economic relationship. It is for me to characterize the consequences that would befall any country, whether the PRC or otherwise, that would seek to help Russia avoid the brunt of the measures that have been put in place by really the rest of the world, or certainly a large majority of the world. And that's the other important point. Russia and China, when you combine their GDPs, it's something like 25% of global GDP. When you combine the GDP, the economic might of the United States, the European Union, our allies in the Indo-Pacific, our other allies and partners that have joined us, well over 50%. So there is not a country out there that would be able to fully extricate Moscow from this. The only thing that could relieve the pressure, that could extricate in a meaningful way Moscow from the morass it has created for itself, is for Putin to change course, to de-escalate and to end the violence.
And is it your understanding that there was an answer on this subject today in Rome?
As I was coming down here, the meeting had not concluded, or at least the last time I received an update, the meeting had not concluded, so I will leave that to the White House to characterize. Yes, sir.
From Airway News TV Pakistan. So it looks like that a few of the neighboring countries of Russia secretly supporting Russian aggression, like China, obviously, India, Pakistan, Iran, and some others, rich Arab countries. So are you engaging with these countries to change their stance on that?
We are engaging with countries around the world, and we have done so from this building. I think you have probably noted that virtually every conversation the Secretary has, which you can glean from our readouts, he raises the issue of Russia and Ukraine. We are doing so intensively at our mission to the UN, and I think you saw the fruits of the efforts out of this building and the fruits of the efforts out of New York in the UN General Assembly vote the other day, where 141 countries came together, the majority of the world's countries, the overwhelming majority of the world's countries, to make clear that this sort of aggression would not stand, and that the vast majority of the world was on the side of the rules-based order that Putin is so blatantly violating, and standing very firmly against his actions. So, of course, we have had conversations with our partners in South Asia. We've had conversations with our partners in the Indo-Pacific, Middle East, Africa, around the world.
A few days back,